Well, hello, good afternoon and good morning, everybody. Thank you for joining us. I'm Matthew Crabb from QA Financial, and this session is part of our 2021 Vision series, focused on the agenda, the key agenda points, if you like, for this still new year in software testing and quality assurance and quality management at financial firms. And this seminar is on the topic of diversity and diversity in software quality management, the impact of diversity on software quality management. We have a very, very distinguished panel today, and I'm delighted to say that the panel is being chaired by Gabriella, and I spoke to Gabby about the idea for this session, actually about a year ago, when Gabby spoke at one of our live events. And I know this topic is very close to her heart, as it is to our other panelists. And we're delighted to have today Allyson Stuart, who is at Refinitiv, which is now a London Stock Exchange Group business. We have Shohreh Mouri, who is with RBC. And we also have Shalini Chaudhari from Infosys. And our panelists will be introducing themselves, starting with Gabby, when they speak, because I don't want to read out a potted bio. I want them to have time to tell you more fully about their experience and about what they're doing now. Just a couple of points on the functionality of this platform. First of all, if you need help, you can see that help button in the top right of your screen, toward the top right of your screen, it's in red. And we have a member of staff who can help you if you have any technical issues. We do recommend that you use the Chrome browser for this platform. If you're having any problems with connectivity, please make sure, first of all, that you're using Chrome. You will see to the right of your screen, there's a button for live Q&A. We'll be leaving time at the end of this 1 hour session for questions. Indeed, if Gabby thinks a question is appropriate to discuss during the course of the conversation, we can ask it earlier. So please send in your questions or your points if you'd like to raise them at any time. And we do welcome questions. We also invite you to join the breakout session after our panel discussion on the hour, in 1 hour's time. Our guests have agreed to stay for 10, 15 minutes or so to talk to you in person. Now, that's a separate session. You have to go back to your timeline by clicking toward the top left of your screen. And you will see breakout session in the agenda. Click on that and you will be taken. That is actually a Zoom meeting. You'll be a member of a Zoom meeting, just like all the other Zooms that you're doing at the moment, and you'll be able to talk one-on-one with our panelists there. So that's it in terms of the practical issues. It's a pleasure now for me to hand over to Gabby, who's going to introduce the section. Thank you, Gabby.
Thank you, Matthew. So it's my honor to be hosting this panel of extraordinary women in the QA realm, who I count both as my colleagues and my friends. I don't think you can make a journey like any of us have made in our careers without a strong cohort. And women that you're going to meet today form that kind of a strong cohort. I encourage all of you, and we're giving you an hour time to rearrange your schedule a little. If you haven't blocked out some time after this session, please do so and join us in the breakout. You'll have the opportunity to spend time with a number of us and talk about issues that are close to your heart. We're going to kick off the session by each of us talking about our journeys, and everybody has bumps in the road, and I think it's very important that we share that this has not been an easy journey, but one that we found very fulfilling. So I will start talking about my own journey, and then I will break out to the other women on the panel. So my journey has always been one of diversity from the time I was a small child. I was born to child survivors of the Holocaust who lived in Hungary. So as a babe in arms, they escaped with me in their arms to Germany from communist Hungary. So diversity meant something very different in our family than most families. It was very important that you be able to say what you want to say, do what you feel is the right thing, because our family grew up like oppressed. So this was something that I followed throughout my career. I'm fortunate that both my parents are still alive, so they can see the success I've had through my life. And we lived in Germany for a number of years and then moved to Canada. I grew up in Toronto and found that my easy subjects were math and science. I never had to study it. I did very well. So I applied for and was accepted to electrical engineering at Carleton University in Ottawa. When I graduated from there, I went to work at Bell Canada. Now, this was a pretty exciting time in the late 80s in Canada. Bell was the first billion-dollar company, and I was the only woman that was admitted to the intern program. So you can imagine the telephone company was not the most progressive company when it came to positions for women. I was very fortunate in one way. The company went on strike. It was the longest strike in history for Bell Canada. So we were out for 4 months. During that time, I was sent on the line because my colleagues thought it would be very funny that I would be put out on the line installing telephone and data lines instead of being in the operator board. I'm dating myself. That was a time when they actually had the operators still hooking up lines. But it was to my advantage because after 4 months, I found out not only was I good at it, I now had a lot of open opportunities at Bell that women weren't afforded. I was put in charge of the NORAD site in North Bay for NATO. That is the sister to the NORAD site in Colorado in the US. So I had all the circuitry responsibilities there. You actually had to travel about a mile underground to get to that facility. So I visited that probably monthly. And progressed my career very quickly then because of all these opportunities I had. In 1995, I joined AOL because my cousins told me about this new service I should get on board at. And I met my husband on AOL and moved to New York City. Ernst & Young brought me over, and I worked on Wall Street for the next 25 years. I spent a lot of time working on the financial services industry while I was at Ernst & Young, and then I joined Sapient to do the same thing. One of the differentiators in my career for me and for me to realize what I want to do and how I want to progress was 9/11. I was pregnant on 9/11. I was almost 7 months along. I was scheduled to be at the top of the World Trade Center. There was a leadership seminar, which most of us in New York remember. We lost many of our colleagues who were there that day. And I was late. I was, being a pregnant woman, and you're a little slower. And I watched the planes crash into the World Trade Center. So I made a decision at that time that I wanted to take a step back and focus on my child. That lasted about a year until my husband told me, you need to go get a more responsible job because you're driving everybody crazy. And that told me something about myself. And that didn't mean that I had to be the perfect mother. My work was very important to me. My husband took over the major functions of taking care of my daughter day to day. We had a nanny, but he did the play dates. He made sure that everything was running well in school. And he could do that. He's a professor, so he had more flexible hours. And it's worked out very well for us. So we have a non-traditional family unit. That being said, I spent a lot of time during the 2000s in India, becoming very familiar with offshoring, how to merge cultures. And this came from how many countries I've lived in and the background of my family. I understood that the culture was very important to an organization, and it still is today. So I spent about 300 days a year traveling until my 9-year-old daughter called me one morning while I was in India and said, I'm by myself having breakfast and I'm lonely. So I said, okay, every morning you call me and we'll have breakfast together. And the next day I found another job. And, you know, sometimes you have to put your family ahead of anything else. So I have spent most of my career now at all of the large banks, Chase, Bank of America, BNY Mellon. And I just finished off at Wells Fargo, where I consolidated 5,000 testers. And then federated them after we fixed our problem and went to Agile. So that gave me a great opportunity to change the direction of my career and do something different. Never counted on the pandemic. So the pandemic has come into play as far as digital transformation. And I'm really focusing now of using my experience over the last many years of transforming QA into QE from a consulting standpoint. So I've joined QAC and focusing on QE transformation going forward. And we're going to talk a lot around QE and the role women play and diversity in making sure that QE becomes successful. So that's me. I will turn this over. We'll start with Allyson Stuart.
Hello, thanks. I'm not sure how I follow that up. That was some story there, Gabby. I've known Gabby for 22 years, so the importance of networking just is something I can't really, state enough. So I'll give you the fluffy part of the career and then kind of talk about my road as well. So I'm the global head of quality engineering at Refinitiv. That recently just became a business under the London Stock Exchange. And it was formerly the risk and financial unit of Thomson Reuters. So we provide market data, infrastructure with technology and analytics, data, risk to power financial communities and other. So my background in IT is 36 years, which is really showing my age. But what's interesting is that I actually never had a technology course in college. I actually studied journalism. So I have been a chief information officer, a chief risk officer, a divisional chief information security officer, and of course, a chief quality officer at various firms, a lot of the big banks such as Merrill Lynch, Credit Suisse, UBS, and Deutsche Bank. I think what is unique is that I became a CIO running QE, and that is not something that you often see. You do not see quality engineering getting to that CIO role or getting to the top of the technology executive leadership at a company. And I did that not once, but twice, thanks to having really amazing teams that helped us get there. I also worked on the vendor side at Genpact, running QE and business development. So I, got to learn that side, and I found that to be very important as well as we're working with different suppliers and appreciating, what they bring to the table. I'm a certified trainer. I'm a certified motivational speaker globally. I'm an executive coach. I've authored 22 technical manuals, and I'm lucky enough to have won 17 awards for by women in innovation, as well as for my work in inclusion and diversity. And I put inclusion first because you really can't have diversity without being inclusive, and I'm extremely passionate about that. So I have run numerous programs just about everywhere I work, and committees and networks in inclusion and diversity. On the personal front, I have 3 kids, son, 2 daughters. I have a granddaughter who will be 1 in 2 weeks. And a fun story that I can tell you, but I'm not allowed to tell anybody else, is that both my son and my daughter let me know just the day before yesterday that they are both expecting, but I'm not allowed to tell each of them that that they are expecting. So I can't wait when that all comes out, when I'm holding that whole secret. So I'm going to be a grandmother again, twice. I'm a sports nut. I quarterbacked my women's high school and college football teams to championships. I played soccer or football, as most would know it, for 14 years. I'm a diehard Boston Red Sox fan. In baseball, if you can see behind me, my whole office is decorated with Red Sox. And I'm a chocoholic, a bad one. And the chocolate in the UK is far better than that in the US. I actually QA'd the ingredients. And I have been waiting for my friends in the UK to send me some chocolate, and they still haven't done that. So if you're on this call, there's a big hint. My career history, the road hasn't been easy, just as Gabby said. It's been a long journey. There's a lot of bumps. But again, I've been fortunate enough to lead a lot of fantastic teams who teach me all the time. Everyone who works for me is smarter than me, and that's just, that's the way I like to work. If you happen to see my speech at Star East or Star West, I was a keynote speaker this year at both of them. You'll hear that, for all that I've done in IT, I always come back to quality engineering. And why is that? Because in quality engineering, you could actually do business analysis, auditing, solution architecture, development, testing, obviously, security checks, data, train, support, create, innovate, deliver. It's like 10 jobs in one. And it's one of the most important roles in a firm, in my opinion, because it's really a glue that binds many areas together as we deliver quality across a life cycle and we mitigate risk at every phase. If you also have recently looked at LinkedIn, I did a post about my team at Refinitiv. This post has 17,000 views already and climbing, but we have won 9 awards between 2019 and 2020, which includes the Testing Team of the Year, Test Management Team of the Year, the Best Automation Project, the overall winner of the North America Testing Awards, the Highly Commendable Testing Team of the Year at the European Testing Awards, and 4 awards for our use of artificial intelligence in testing from our China-based team, where we had an article published in the largest social media forum. It was recognized by one of the world's most foremost leaders in AI. So why am I citing this about my background is because of this. Out of a testing team of 900 that we have, 50% are women. And the test management leadership team that we have is 50% women. And the best automation project that we won the award for was developed by women. And the 4 AI awards that we have were all developed and done by women. So I have an amazing and a brilliant team. I equally adore all of them, men and women, but whoever says that women can't do it all, yeah, we can. So just a little bit quicker background is that by background, I was going to be an interpreter in college. That's what I went into. And then I realized in French poetry class that this wasn't for me. So I went on to study journalism. And I was going to write the Great World novel, and I haven't yet, but that's still in my plan. So when I graduated college, I was offered a job in journalism, writing obituaries in a place where I would have been writing a lot of obituaries, and I probably could have been one of those obituaries. And I was also offered a job selling statistical quality control software in the manufacturing industry. And I wanted to go to New York City and kind of just top my friends being the first to New York City. So I did take the sales job selling statistical quality control software, kind of full circle, but realized as I was selling it, I felt guilty because the product was crap. And I found myself testing it and trying to figure out how to fix it better and how to make it better for clients. So that's how I made my switch into technology. It was Unix-based. So I ended up teaching myself Unix and then learning from different people and reading books and sponging everything I could. And my first true technical job was actually as a Unix system administrator. I then went on to Dow Jones. It was my second risk. I'm a risk taker, and it was going out of the industry I was in, which was medical, into the financial industry, where Dow Jones needed a technical trainer. So I went to Dow Jones to do technical training. And one of my classes that I was teaching was the QA group at Dow Jones, and they were a real pain. They were asking a lot of questions. They were trying to debugged my training, and I was, became, it was very frustrating, but I was also fascinated with what they did. So I went to the QA leader and I said, hey, I want to work for you. I want to start testing. And that's where I became my first official QA and my first official testing job. So there is where I became a certified trainer. So then from there, just, to kind of shorten this up, there's a lot of other people that have to speak, I went on to do testing. I will say this, I was testing a new product called Windows. So I was one of the first testers of Windows. I went on to Merrill Lynch, and that's actually where I met Gabby, and also where I met my husband, who is a QA director there. And we stayed friends, and eventually after we left, I asked him on a date, and luckily that worked out. I was also caught in 9/11. Like Gabby, my boss was the keynote speaker at Windows of the World. And I was there when the planes went in, and lucky enough that a stranger saved me. I think, that taught me a lot too. It's where we really saw the heroes rise, and those same heroes, the first responders in the front line that we're seeing with the pandemic today. But as a result of that, I went to run problem management at Merrill Lynch, and then change management, and then built a program and operations to run out of Jacksonville. But as everything goes, back and forth to quality engineering, because that's my passion. So I went on to run quality engineering at Credit Suisse. Then I built their first change management function. And then an interesting switch was because of being involved in an employee network and committees, I became very acquainted with the overall CIO at Credit Suisse, who wanted someone technical to run their graduate program. And because of that networking, I got that job. And that was one of my favorite jobs, because it's really important that we give graduates, a really good experience coming out of school, and give them that training and that education to set their path for success. So after Credit Suisse, I went to Genpact. I worked on the business side, and that was my next risk, because I had only been managing 200 people, and they wanted me to manage 2,000. And I was like, well, 200, 2,000, what's the difference? I knew I had personality, knew I could figure and learn the rest of it when I got there. So I took that chance and went on to do QE, running their QE for Genpact and their business development, and smashed their sales record, which still holds today. And post that, to wrap it up, I went on from Genpact to Deutsche Bank, and had the great challenge, and that's where I got my CIO role. There was nothing easy. Went in with 60 vendors, 100 tools, multiple suppliers, siloed ways of working, very waterfall, low automation, and really had to set the strategy to get QE to the top, which I can talk about later. I also had the honor of running diversity and inclusion, which I improved 3.3% at Deutsche Bank. Working on everything from women, LGBTQ, age, ethnicity, everything that you can think of. And that's really just truly a passion for me. And then went on to Refinitiv to build this incredible org that I've built today. And in that, we really do have these accelerated shared testing services and automation, performance, test data, and security. We have 22 different people programs, 3 centers of excellence, change champions programs, communities of practice, a career role framework, and a truly well-defined career path and training program that I think had earned us awards. So I'm very, very grateful for my team for being able to do that, and once again, get us to the leadership table. So, okay, hopefully that was 5 minutes. That might have been longer, Gabby. I apologize.
It's a few minutes longer, but I think everyone can understand why Allyson and the other women are on this panel. You're going to hear some phenomenal stories, and Allyson was just the start of that. And I can attest to this woman's dedication to diversity, casting a wide net, which we will talk about, to ensure diversity inclusion, and to her love of chocolate. We had many a Mrs. Fields cookie when we worked together. So I'm going to turn it over to Shalini Chaudhari, who, by the way, this is a very global panel, we are represented by 3 different countries. So Shalini is joining us from India.
Thanks a lot, Gabby, and a very good morning, good afternoon, and good evening to all our listeners. Allyson, it's a tough one to follow, but I'm going to try my best. So the way I was thinking about it, when Gabby said, let's do our own introductions, and I started mapping my professional career, and I realized that I can sort of break it into 3 parts. So last 21 years, I've broken it into 3 parts. And the interesting thing I found as I was doing that my career has followed sort of the career of testing, quality engineering, and QA to QE kind of a journey. So let me elaborate on that. But before I get into that, just a bit of a background. So I was born and brought up in a small town right in the middle of India. The state is actually called the Central State. And the reason I'm talking about it is diversity. I was born into diversity. So this, imagine there's a small town and a smaller community where people from across different states of India have come together to work on this big steel plant that is being set up. So being part of that community, where, as many of you would know, India is a very diverse country with multiple languages, multiple cultures, multiple festivals, and humongous range of food. So I was born in that melting pot of what I choose to call mini India. So for me, dressing differently, speaking a different language, eating differently, celebrating different things was just life. And as I look back today, I think that has been the foundation of diversity in my life. And like Allyson said, it's all about inclusion and diversity. So for the rest of my life, for the rest of my career, I have been a passionate advocate of diversity and inclusion. And I think was the seed that got me into doing this. So now jumping ahead, I finished my engineering. So I am an engineer. The interesting thing was that when I was in school, we had a computer class. This was the first time, and I learned how to write an algorithm. And I remember the first homework paper that I submitted, I got like massive excellent written on it with 2 exclamation marks. I came home to my parents and I declared, I will do something with computers. I like this whole algorithm stuff. And I think that was the seed of doing something with computers way back in school. So having finished my engineering, doing a couple of jobs where I grew up, I got into Infosys. And just for our listeners and viewers, I am at Infosys right now, but that was my first stint at Infosys. So now starts the 3-phase story, if you will, from about 1999 to 2007. And I would say that was the foundation of my quality engineering career. And that happened by chance. So like everybody else around that time, I was a developer. I learned C, I learned SQL, I understood databases. And within 1 year of joining Infosys, I was shipped what is called on-site. So I was at a client site. We were working on a warehouse management system, and it was full of issues, defects. There were monthly releases and weekly releases that were going out into production every Saturday morning. And pretty much all of us would be prepared to go into this war room, all lines open, what has gone wrong kind of a scenario. And that was sort of just how we lived life. We were about 10 of us from Infosys working for the client. And that used to be our life. Work, develop for 5 days a week, deploy on Saturday morning, and then spend a couple of days trying to fix what went wrong. So during that whole course, I was given this program to write. And I wanted to make sure that I do it well. So these are the dates when there were no test management tools. We weren't thinking automation. So I had reams and reams of paper where I wrote down different scenarios and I tested my program. So now imagine the release has gone in, nobody gets a call over the weekend. So Monday morning, we are all sitting in what we used to call bullpen. Our director, Karen, she comes in and she said, what happened? Why did we not go live? Why did we not push the release? And we said, but we did. And then she said, but why is there no war room? And then she looked at me and she said, weren't you putting a brand new program with this release? And I said, yes, we did. And there was no problem. And she said, what did you do? I said, I tested. And then she turned around and said, I don't know what that means, but whatever you did from now on, that's all you will do. I must say, and again, looking back, I think we were a group of these 10 people, I'm only a woman. Everybody sort of rejoiced because, I have always felt that women got pushed into testing because that was thought of something at the end of the food chain. I, on the other hand, felt really grand because now I could actually make things better. I didn't have to write code, I could just critique everybody. And that also gave me the chance to learn about the business. So I started learning about the business. I started learning about why it was important if a replenishment did not go through, why it was important if a carton was in limbo, or if that financial report did not run. So if I back, those 6 or 7 years were the formative years for me. Now, flipping to what was happening in the industry, I think this was the time when people had started recognizing importance of what we called independent testing. So we weren't leaving testing just to the developers. If you look across, both for me at our client sites, people had started setting up test teams. I was part of one of them. Even from a professional services perspective, you pick up any big professional services firm, the seeds of this testing group, application testing or QA or quality as it used to be called, different names back then, started. And that's what was happening at Infosys as well. So while Karen made me a tester, people at Infosys, there were 2 or 3 people who were getting together and saying, we need to set this up as a business. We need to set this up as a unit. And given the fact that I was already part of something like that, our paths crossed. And I say it with great sense of pride that I was part of the first few people who got together at Infosys and started this group that we initially called Independent Validation Solutions. Today, we carry that name. It is now Infosys Validation Solutions. So I am a proud member of the initial group. I still remember the first Testing Center of Excellence white paper I wrote in 2003. It just seems like really long back ago, but those were the times that I went on to become a test analyst, from a tester and a test manager. So I was building my foundation. The industry was building its foundation, and all saw the rise of independent testing, independent validation services and solutions across the board. At that time, it was a lot about what was called black box testing, a lot about understanding the business and validating that the requirements were met. You saw a rise of a lot of tools, test management things, and so on and so forth. Frankly, at that point in time, and I was thinking about the challenges that I have faced, I cannot think of any because the industry was with us, independent testing was becoming important. I was getting promoted. I was taking up more and more responsibilities, and being part of a new group, I got to play every role. So whether it was selling our services, whether it was creating solutions for our customers, whether it was creating, these formats of TCOE, creating test methods, creating test metrics, I was part of all of that movement, and I loved every minute of it. I would say this sort of continued till about 2006, 2007. I spent a lot of time in US during time. I worked across different clients, learned about, right from logistics and warehouse management systems to communications to financial services. And that gave me a broad, what I would call domain base. When I came back to India in 2006, having stayed away for so long, I had this whole idea that I've worked too long and I wanted to take a break. A chance meeting with a friend got me into Accenture, and that is where I would say my next set of phase in my professional career began. That is when I joined Accenture, was part of the testing where it was new still. Accenture was new in India. So I got to do a lot of what I had done at Infosys, create the testing group. And I think a good inflection point in my career was when I was asked to become the head of India testing practice. But that is where I think I first faced a major crossroad in my career. So having joined Accenture, I was doing well in testing group. And then as part of that, I created TCOE for one of Accenture's big technology clients. And while I was there, one day my manager called me and he said, look, TCOE is great. You're managing a certain set of people, but for you to get promoted and go to the next level, you need to manage a broader set of responsibilities. And that would include application management, application development, and everything. Are you up for the challenge? I'm not a person who says no to a challenge, so I accepted and I started doing a broader role. And I soon realized that I wanted to be a quality engineering expert. And this is the time when you had started seeing a lot of technology come into this space. And it was not leaving me enough time to scale up on the technology side. So it was a hard decision. My promotion was at stake, but I made that call. I walked over to my manager and said, this is all great, but I want to stay with testing. And for anybody who's worked on the vendor side, being on bench is a big deal, because if you're on bench, then you do not know what your next project is going to be. But I took that risk because I wanted to build my expert in the whole quality engineering space, in the application testing space.
Shalini, we got 2 minutes. We've got about 2 minutes left for you.
Sure. So basically, at that point in time, now when I look back, I think it was a great decision, because that's what landed me the responsibility of being the test practice lead for India. And that is when I really built up on the technology aspects of it. So right from cloud to data warehousing to application management, digital transformation. And the high point there was I was part of a team that used machine learning to create a testing solution for our clients. We filed a patent for it, and I got the Accenture Innovator Award along with my team. So that, I think, was the second phase where I would say even the industry saw influx of technology, and that's where you started seeing the engineering thing come into the whole QA space. The last phase is where I have been working on global strategy at Accenture. I was part of the leadership that decided and defined the global strategy for the services. That's my current role at Infosys as well. I have rejoined Infosys 5 months back to the same group that I was part of creating. And I am currently managing and working on the overarching strategy for our unit and how we should go external to the market and talk to our customers. The other thing that I would just want to say is that this, I think, period has also been the transformation. And I think, like Allyson was saying, it has gone from just QA to being QE. And in my mind, it is 10 jobs or maybe even 20 jobs rolled into one. I believe beyond 2021, quality engineering will take another step. It will be an integrated quality engineering across everybody. Quality, I believe, is everybody's business, and quality engineers will have to be custodians of the customer experience. We have to be custodians of quality, whether it's operations, whether it's business, or whether it's engineering. And I'm glad that my role today allows me to do that. One last point, Gabby, before I hand it back to you. In all of this, from an Infosys perspective, I tell you that our unit is highest on diversity. We have won awards on being the most diverse unit. We have women who've become SDETs. We have women who've done innovation. Our current innovation lead is a woman. We have delivery heads who are women. And I don't think there is anything that women cannot do in field of technology or in field of quality engineering. So as I look forward to becoming us quality engineers, becoming custodians of quality and custodians of customer experience, it's very exciting times ahead. So Gabby, back to you.
Thank you, Shalini. And I think just listening to Allyson and yourself, running to the fire is part of all of our fabric. We're up for the challenge, and I think that's one of the things women bring to the table is the creativity, the ability to think out of the box. In fact, most of us don't even have a box to think in. It's all about being very creative and meeting the needs that are presented to us at any point in time. So we're going to finish up with a personal favorite of mine. I've just met her recently, but Mouri Shohreh from RBC, Royal Bank of Canada, is joining us from Canada. So the third country that we're represented today. So I'll hand it over to you.
Thank you, Gabby. First of all, it's an honor to be part of this panel of wonderful women. It's very difficult to follow them, as you can all imagine, with the vast knowledge and experience that they've had in the field. And I know we're kind of 40 minutes into it, so I'll try to make it as brief as possible so we can get to a lot of great points that I'm sure this panel has. Again, honored to be here. Currently, I'm a Vice President of Quality Engineering for Royal Bank of Canada, which is one of the biggest bank in Canada. So I'm very honored to have that position. I started my journey 26 years ago, right after school, and I did study computer science and information technology, information systems. One of the very few women in my class. And honestly, I never thought I would get into this field or head towards technology. But 26 years ago, not knowing exactly what I wanted to do and liking math and sciences, it just felt like a right place to be. And my parents pushed me, so I can't really take the credit for that. But they did push me to get into something that was completely new. So I started that, and since then, I have been really focused in software development and testing. And I'll be very honest that at the time, starting in this industry, getting into development was practically impossible as a woman. And I worked with a lot of qualified coders who were women, but the opportunities for them getting into development just did not come along. And there was this small team on the corner that did testing. So it was kind of naturally where we started to kind of be put against. So I felt like, looking back at it now, I realized how we were pigeonholed into certain roles. Now, having said that, once I got to know what it took to become a good tester and a leader eventually, to what Allyson said a few minutes ago, I realized how I wasn't actually pigeonholed to code a specific requirement, but I was actually responsible for ensuring that a feature was getting to the client in the best quality and ability that existed. So I had to work not just with a PM that told me how much time I had. I had to work with architecture. I had to work with the business. I had to work with the client. I had to work with infrastructure. I had to work. So it was such a vast understanding of what it took to do delivery that I really fell in love with delivery. That job allowed me to understand what it took to deliver and what it took to build a product. And that I actually felt quite responsible in ensuring that that product was meaningful to the client and it went in with the best quality possible. So that just really got me into becoming a part of the delivery team, working closely with people, understanding what their roles were and how I contributed to that role, which allowed me to really understand how organizations work. And I'm not sure if I would have picked that up if I hadn't taken that role years ago. I did move on between QA and project management and program delivery again because I really liked them. But I, like all the other ladies on this panel, I kept on going back to the same thing. Quality engineering helped me really be part of a much bigger production than just being, in a specific role. And as I grew, and I started with smaller companies here in Canada, mainly startups, and in just before year 2000, and then 2000 Y2K happened. For those of you guys who've been around and remember Y2K, there was such a massive focus on technology at the point. So the jobs became more and more apparent in the industry. Even though really, as we all remember, nothing really happened, when the time changed to year 2000, we were all pretty safe. But I'm not sure if we just panicked too much or whether it was all the great work that we did to ensure that we didn't have any outages. So that's yet to be, determined. I didn't really focus on it too much. I just kind of moved on. But that's where a lot of jobs started to happen, and I started to get a lot of experience. And that caused also this concept of what we call agile, but it was called extreme programming back then. And I got very much engaged into extreme programming with one of our lead architects. And that really completely opened my mind into what it was to do good quality work. So I looked at it from a perspective was, to Shalini's point, quality isn't just my job to tell you whether I can assure your feature. It became all of our jobs. It had to be built from the beginning to the end, from the moment that we decided what architecture should look like to the moment that it went into client's hand and got maintained. And to build these concepts into the complete life cycle is where I got a lot of enjoyment from it. And extreme programming also pushed us from, historically QA roles were all about documenting and they were still running these concepts like the books that were written in 1970s. And we were no longer in 1970s, we were in a new century. And so what did we need to change now to become more agile, become more part of the team, become more technical? And not just domain experts, but have the domain expertise within your product in the business sense, and also have an understanding of what it would take to be technical. How do you automate? How do you automate the processes that exist? That kind of, in a nutshell, got me to where I am. And I went, like I said, from smaller companies, in startups to being bought by JD Edwards to PeopleSoft, and then eventually hostile takeover for Oracle, which also taught me a lot about what it takes for organization to go from, small shop of 100 people to 40,000, and I don't even know how many it is. And after I had my children, I have two children. They're teenagers now, which is its own, challenge. I wasn't sure exactly what I was going to do with my career. I started to do some contract work, which was also extremely helpful because it exposed me to go into companies where I didn't really know too many people. I had 6 months to prove myself. And any of you guys who have been in consulting, that going in, most people look at you like, who are you? And do you really understand technology? Because I'm not sure if you do. To having to really quickly, show yourself and be very authentic about who you are and genuine and show that you can pretty much handle anything and being able to do that in a very short period of time. And then eventually
we've got 2 minutes.
Okay, no problem. Eventually, I landed at RBC, and here's where I am. And I started with the digital transformation at RBC. We did some fantastic work there, and I was asked by our executive VP if I could do something similar for the rest of the bank. So I'm now running the Center of Excellence, building solutions, and more recently, I've been asked to co-lead and chair the Women in Technology within the Diversity and Leadership program at RBC, which is another honor. And maybe I'll just leave it at that, given that we got not too much time left, as quickly as I could go. And that's about it from my background.
Oh, that was fantastic. And thank you all for sharing your experiences. I think it's very telling that although all of us have had very different paths, we've all been challenged during our career and we've embraced it. And that's really what diversity brings to the table. So let's get started with a few topics to talk about. This is certainly a very interesting time. If anybody had said a year ago that we would have been in a pandemic for almost a year, I would have told them that they're watching too many sci-fi movies. And yet here we are. Everyone's working from home. And digital transformation is the focus of every company right now. So let's talk about how the diversity, increasing women, focusing on the skill sets women bring to the table can aid digital transformation. Especially, let's talk about AI, which has certain limitations associated with it as well. And then finally, the last piece, which is probably one of the most telling around COVID, is how many women are leaving the workforce right now due to the environment of COVID, not being able to integrate their careers with being at home, taking care of the kids, schooling, and probably doing housework because you can't bring in your cleaning staff either. So let's go with Allyson and hear your comments on that.
There was several topics in there, but let me first focus on AI because, there is unconscious bias no matter what. But, with artificial intelligence right now, there is, without a doubt, that unconscious bias. And if you don't have women, participating and contributing and being part of those solutions, then the outcome is going to be something not planned for. And so I'll just, as a quick reference, there's a great article, I read it again last night, and a great documentary called Coded Bias. And if you're not familiar with this, I suggest that you look at this. And it's about, Joy Buolamwini. I know I'm going to pronounce her name wrong, but she was a graduate student at MIT working on facial recognition software. And when she was trying to get the system to recognize her, it never did. She is a Black woman, and it only did when she put on a white mask. So that's when it picked up her facial recognition. And because of her work, it stopped Microsoft, Amazon from actually rolling out and, their facial recognition software. She made that big difference. And then she ended up finding the algorithmic, I can never say that word, Justice League for inclusion in AI. So it's really relevant that women, have that opinion. And I'll give you one more example, and it's actually my husband's. He was working on a software product for one of the most large #1 investment banks in the world, and it was artificial intelligence for you to do investments. And I creeped over his shoulder, and the product, first of all, was in black, white, and gray colors, not appealing to a woman. Being perfectly honest, the images were all men. And the investment strategy, when we're playing around with it, is that since it was coded completely by men and looked at by men, that every time the investment recommendations came out, it was aggressive. Now, as a woman, I am more conservative. I don't want to lose my money. And it was amazing that was coming out, but that is because there was no women behind that. So the power that we have to make that difference has to come into play. I want to give others a chance to talk as well.
Yeah, I do think this is not a topic that's embraced around AI. Everybody focuses on the technology side, but we all know that the technology only gets properly implemented and embraced when the culture side and the people side gets worked out. And that's very predominant around the AI. Shohreh, I'd love to hear what you think about this.
I was just going to kind of extend that my thoughts around that as well. So I think that we all know that AI relies quite a lot on the data that we collect and are selected by humans, really, and that the AI is trained through these machine learning algorithms that are created by humans. So you can imagine, if there's only the data sets are looking for on collecting use cases from one segment of the society, you're missing a completely bigger segment of society that are women, people of color, people from ethnic background, different cultures, which is really part of our community. We have to stop thinking about it, from a very perspective of who I am. And migration happens across the world. People are coming in and out of different countries. I hope one day we won't have borders anymore. We can all look at it from the fact that we're all part of the same. We can freely move through, and technology is proving that we can freely move through these thoughts and ideas. So if you don't build AI to incorporate all the different cultures and communities, then the decisions you're going to be making through that AI algorithm is going to be completely biased. And if you look at the chatbots, for example, that are quite popular right now, every site we go to, there's a chatbot. There are women now that are taking ownership of financial decisions within their households. More and more women are making those decisions within households. Historically, that was mainly men that did that. So if you don't consider that a woman will sign in and wants to have a chat session with the algorithm that is running it, then you're not really considering the bigger picture. You're not being diverse.
So thank you. We're running a little late, so we're actually going to extend by 10 minutes. Hopefully the audience will be able to stay with us, and then we'll have the breakout room. But this is just to let you know the timing around the session today. So I'm going to finish off with Shalini, who probably has some significant observations because she sees this across the industry.
Yes, Gabby. Take this, the whole AI conversation a little bit to the unconscious bias or even conscious bias that we were referring to. Interestingly, there was a study that was done where if equal number of women and men joined the technology industry, the industry that we are all in, the women are double the number of the population leaving the technology industry than men. And it is not because they needed to pursue higher studies or not because they needed to, take care of other things. It is because of the workplace conditions. And I think that's where this whole bias comes in. And then I want to talk about this interesting study that I read. It's a 2017 study, so fairly recent. It's called, it's about the brilliance bias. So, if you look at 5-year-old boys and girls, and if you told the 5-year-old girls that here's a game which is for really, really smart people, they would put their hands up to play. But if you told that same thing to 6- and 7-year-old girls, they would not put their hands up to play. So interestingly, this study is proving that the brilliance bias, the bias that women cannot be really, really smart, is starting to seep in at a very early age. Now I want to extend this, and I want to say that if this is what's happening, I think organizations have a huge responsibility when they define what is the meritocracy paradigm for judging women, because I think that is where I think biases come in. Interestingly, if a woman is aggressive, she's told she's too aggressive, she's starved, she's not collaborative. But if that same persona is exhibited by a man, it's like he's driven. So I would say that there are a lot of real life biases that can be handled. And then going back to what Shohreh and Allyson were saying, once we start handling those biases, we will all do the right programming. We will all have the right training data to train our AI, because it, scares my heart to think that if we are programming, we are training our artificial intelligence using these biases, then, all the work that these researchers are bringing out and all the work that is being done to fight these biases, we are letting them pervade into our AI. So I think what I'm saying is there is a responsibility both with an individual, and this goes back to the whole women leading women supporting women kind of a thing. And I think it's a huge responsibility for organizations, both at the time when they're hiring women and the time when they're trying to retain women. So I'm challenging the brilliance bias, I'm challenging the meritocracy bias, and I'm saying let it be an equal playing ground for hiring and retaining women.
I mean, that lends a very interesting point. This is a time, an unprecedented time for female leadership in IT, in financial services. You have Lori Beer at Chase, you have Bridget Engle at BNY Mellon, you have Kathy Besant at Bank of America. Yet we still see a large number of women dropping out at the mid-levels. You don't see it at the entry, you don't see it at the top, you see it at the middle level, which is the most disconcerting because that is the largest layer to focus on. So I think, this is a cry out to the women who are in charge to take this on and focus on the mid-level of our workforce, because, the easy part is the new recruits. We end up losing them after a few years, and the answer is why.
I think
I have a comment. Go ahead, Allyson. Go ahead.
The virtual working, right?
Yeah. Yeah, just quickly, I think one of some of the things I read an article not too long ago. Maybe I can figure out a way to share it and the community can take a look at it. But one of the reasons why they were seeing that women leave organizations, as everyone knows, there's a ton of, push for getting diversity at the more executive level. Companies are not doing very well, but, at least there is an attempt to get there, which is better than nothing. So, but one of the things that they're seeing that women are not staying in these leadership positions was because their personal values and wanting to advance the collective goals is not historically what people in executive positions do. It's again in a man's concept, and historically has been more about perception, where for women has been more about self-identity and purpose and working with others. So if we're not putting women in positions of challenge, or we're not considering them for new assignments, they're eventually gonna just wanting to leave. They're no longer interested because they don't feel challenged. They don't want to be there. And I think that's still happening, unfortunately, to the biases that are existing. So companies are starting to put women in more executive position, like many of us around this panel are. But once they're set there, they're kind of set there. They're not being asked to take on new challenges, be given new assignments. And I think that's part of the problem. You give up and you want to go and find yourself something challenging outside. Sorry, go ahead, Allyson.
Well, I think it falls on both sides, right? There is the company obligation, and it's our own as well. So, historically, women don't market themselves, right? And it's one of those things that we need to do, because we could assume that our boss knows that we want to be promoted. And you hope that they do because of the work that you're doing, or that you want to work on this project, or that you want to you have this skill set that could match a new role. And so we don't, typically say anything, but one of the best things that you can do, and the best piece of advice I can do, is market yourself and go and ask your manager, go and ask someone, tell them what it is you want. Tell them that you want to be promoted. Tell them that you want to get ahead. And if you have a good leader, your leader is going to advocate for you. And what's the worst that can happen? And if it's not happening, you have opportunities then to really move somewhere else, right? So if you're not getting it, you do have the ability to move somewhere else because there's so much. It's also really important that, you network, because again, with diversity committees, with different, employee networks that there are, you're going to meet people. You're going to meet people from different parts of your firm, people that you're going to connect with, and they're going to sit there and, get to see you, get to know you, get to watch you in action. I got 3 of my jobs, from being in those employee networks. And I got my CIO job because I went and I asked my, our overall CTO, I told him, what do I need to do? I want to be a CIO. So I think, these are things that have to happen. And at the same time, companies have to do and have to put in true programs. And a lot of companies have, right? They have targets. There was a target from the financial firms for most to put 40% of women into roles in the financial industry. And there's one now, which is 25% people of color to be in executive roles by 2024. Personally, I think that's a little bit too long. Should be a lot faster. But I firmly believe that, it's not just targets at that executive level, but there has to be that measurement at that middle level management who are hiring people on how they are doing, because sometimes they're just not aware, or sometimes they need to see that data and that metrics talks for them to take action. I want to give other people, again, a chance to talk, but certainly can share a couple of different things that we did as companies also to actually retain the women that we have and to also improve our numbers. But let me turn over to my colleagues.
So I think one of the things that's important for women is, I think you're absolutely right. Women tend to be very cooperative. They even might express their want to move forward. And when that doesn't happen and they're told, well, maybe next year, they say thank you and they sit back in their chair. Well, the one thing I found very successful for me was I set the limit of what I needed. If I didn't get it, I moved on. And, women have, and that's actually acting like a man. And that's actually not a bad thing to do, because that's how you set the success factor in financial services, which is still a man's world in a lot of ways. I'd like to hear what Shalini and Shohreh think about this.
So Gabby, I just want to build on what Allyson was saying. I really think in a lot of these leadership conversations, I'm often asked, what do you think the biggest challenge women face? And most people literally are expecting me to say work-life balance. But, my answer is not work-life balance. My answer is risk-taking. Studies after studies have shown that if there's a job opening, a man who thinks he's 10, 20, 25% ready will put his hand up and then, throw his name in the hat for that job. While a woman who is actually 90% ready will say, let me do that additional work. Let me wait another year when I will be 100% ready. So even when we see a door, instead of putting our shoulder to that door, we stop and wait. And my message to women across the world, across industries is, when you see that door, open it and walk through it. Because guess what? You have the ability, and what you can do is ask for support. I do that all the time. And just as a personal story, I'm committed to my work. I'm committed to bringing women in technology. I lead the Anita B local chapter here. There are times, and I love cooking. I love to cook dinner, but there are times when I'll turn to my husband and say, sweetheart, we are having Maggie tonight. Maggie is, by the way, those 2-minute noodles in India. And then he's absolutely fine. So sometimes we women want to be super women. We want to be 100% ready. And that is what I would say. Put your hand up, you see that door, you walk right through it, you can ask for support, you can, count on your talent, and you can learn. So that's what I would want to say to our listeners out there. Gabby, back to you.
All right, so we're coming up to the end of the session. We've run over, and we still have a lot to talk about. So I invite everybody who's on this call right now to join us in the breakout room, and we will continue the discussion. We'll answer any questions that you have. Happy to continue the conversation. And I thank everyone for attending this. And I especially thank Matthew for hosting the first women diversity session for QA Financial. I've really enjoyed my time here.
Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you very much, Gabby, and thank you, everybody. Just to remind you, if you would like to chat to our panelists, could you please click top left, go back to your timeline, and you'll see a button to join the breakout session. We'll see you there. That's Zoom, so it's a slightly different platform. You'll be part of the meeting, so do please be aware of that. But I'd just like to say thank you once more to Shohreh, to Shalini, to Allyson, and to Gabby, of course. Thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your experience. Thank you, everybody, and we'll see you, hopefully, some of you, in that breakout session.
Take care. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.